yeah, now I wish I just spoke in Korean and like talked to other students from Korea, like, because you know that's what would have made me more comfortable. Like if I weren't trying so hard to not be myself. And I was actually talking to a friend the other day. He is also an immigrant. He speaks conversational English, but he has like a bit of an accent, and you can hear it. And he was talking about how like his accent sometimes gets in the way of like communicating with other people. And then I told him like if I could go back to when I had an accent, I don't think I would try to get rid of it because I think it's kind of cool that like it shows where you're coming from. Like it shows your heritage because like if you've spoken a language in like a country from the time of your birth, like why should you change the way you talk? You know what I mean? So yeah, my thoughts have changed a lot, but like I guess yeah, just I didn't think the same way. So I did. I hope that makes sense.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Nuanced Nonsense. We're not experts, we just like talking. This is your co-host Alex.
And your other co-host, Ben, and I brought on my friend from college and also dancer, Charlotte Yun. Would you like to say anything about yourself?
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I went to UT with Ben. I graduated in 2019 and I've been working as a software engineer.
Yeah, so we typically start with like an easy question. And since I know you're Korean, what is your favorite dish and why?
Ooh, that's a hard question.
Oh
favorite,
no.
favorite Korean dish. It has to be kimchi. I mean, kimchi is such a staple. You can't really have a Korean meal without kimchi. And that's like the essential. Rice and kimchi, but more so kimchi. Yeah.
So would you recommend to just like the general populace that they try kimchi?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's good for you. It's not for everyone. Some people hate it. Some people really like it. But yeah, it's a very good food because it has a lot of like good bacteria or whatever. So yeah, everyone should try it.
Ooh, actually, I heard about this from some of my other Korean friends. Do you ferment your own kimchi?
No, that's so much work. That's like
Yeah.
at that point, if you're fermenting your own kimchi, like your cooking level is at like the level of like a 65-year-old grandma. Basically, that's like you're at level 65. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that stuff is like out of the league for a lot of people, but some people might, and I like applaud them for doing that. Yeah.
I remember hearing in like old, like maybe Korean societies that like they would have like maybe like some designated people to grow kimchi for like everyone in like the village or something like that. But then I think as like science evolved or something like that, then it became much more like a independent business, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard that like before, you know, like even in the early 1900s or like before like technology and like industrialization happened, um, people in the village would like get together into like one person's house and they would just like all make kimchi together. Like all of the moms basically and like would just make kimchi and then before they had refrigerators, they put like this giant like container of kimchi. It has to be like a specific container. I don't know what it's called in English, but like made out of some stone, and they would dig a hole in the ground, and they would put that kimchi in the ground, and they would ferment it for like a season or so. And they would eat it. So yeah,
Wow. Yeah, honestly, like
yeah,
hearing about the process of like how a lot of like food is created, it's honestly a lot like an art, you know. It's very artisanal.
hmm I agree. I agree. Yeah.
Do you like to cook Korean food at home or is it more like a variety?
I would say a variety. Like I love to cook, but I never cook in like a specific cuisine. I just
Ah.
cook whatever I want, you know, whatever looks good, whatever I think would taste good. So, yeah.
Everything's fair game. Um,
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess in our prep session yesterday, like you mentioned how like you were born in Korea and then you moved here to the US at the age of 12. Uh, could you like I guess maybe tell us like what is it like kind of staying true to your Korean heritage while living in like a foreign country?
Hmm. Staying true to my Korean heritage. Ah, I was actually not very good at trying to preserve my heritage and like being proud of my background until I grew older. But it's something that I try to do now, even though I've been very Americanized, from like the 9 years of living here. I call my mom, I call my parents. That's the first thing I do because I get to talk in Korean and I get to know what's going on with my family in Korea or like what other things are going on in Korea. So that's the first thing I do. Um, and I just, I guess, take pride in where I come from. And that's very internal. Like, I don't need to be loud about it, but I know where I'm proud of where I come from. And that makes me who I am. So I always try to appreciate the culture and just my backgrounds and like not be embarrassed about it like I was whenever I was younger, whenever I had just moved to the US and I just felt like such a, such an alien. Like I just didn't feel like I fit in. I felt like where I come from is like something I should be ashamed of because no one else was like me. Everyone else around me were just either Americans or Americanized foreigners. And I thought I had to be that way. So I think I spent a lot of my middle school and high school years trying to hide my heritage and trying to like fix my accent. That's one of the reasons why I don't have an accent. I just sound American is because like in middle school I was so embarrassed of my accent that I would practice getting rid of it so much, which is something that I wish I hadn't done. Like I wish I hadn't felt that way. So most of my efforts now is thinking back about those days and not repeating that same feeling or like not repeating those same thoughts. You know what I mean? Like growing up from that sense of like embarrassment because when you're 12 years old, you're like, you want to fit in and stuff like that. Just like not feeling that way anymore, I guess. Yeah.
Interestingly, do you like now when you speak Korean, do you have like an American accent? Because I know when I speak foreign languages, I have an American accent. People can tell.
Well, I don't have an American accent per se, but I just sound awkward. I sound like a Korean American whose second language is Korean. That's what I sound like now. And that's like one of the reasons why I regret it so much. Like in middle school and high school, I like, friends would make fun of me because, other kids are also in middle school, high school. They're not mature,
Yeah.
So like they used to make fun of me from my English, my accent and stuff like that. And like I just laughed it over back then, but it really hurt me. I was like, I don't want to be made fun of like that. So like I started practicing English so much. Like I started thinking in English. I started speaking to myself in English so I can like practice more. I started speaking to my mom in English, my brother in English. So that's like I started forgetting Korean that way, where I could have like kept the Korean language in my life. I just like tried to get rid of it because I wanted to be more Americanized. So that's one of the reasons why I think my Korean isn't as good as it should be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, something like oh sorry,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Oh yeah. You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. Something like I kind of noticed growing up too, like obviously my experience is different from yours because I was born and raised here. But even growing up as like a second generation, like Chinese, Hong Kong American, like there are a lot of moments where like I felt like being white was to be normal versus like being like, oh, like being Asian is good enough, So like I remember like my parents would, I would have a lunchbox moment like in school and that like I would kind of bring like dumplings or whatever and then it would be really smelly and then people would just be like, dude, what is that, And then I never suggested to my mom to cook like white food because my mom has a very strong personality and she would have destroyed me for not appreciating her cooking. But there are like little moments like that, or like I remember like I literally had in second grade, I was sent to the vice principal's office because two guys in my class were like making like slanted eyes at me, and I didn't realize back then like what was wrong with it, but I just knew like it made me like uncomfortable and angry, right? And then we got sent to the principal's office and we had to play a board game together so we could become friends. But there's like little things like that. Like even though I was technically born here, like I always felt like I was like never gonna be considered American, you know. Like I was a perpetual foreigner. I remember in high school, me and like another Chinese American friend, we were just talking of like the substitute teacher because like it was the end of the year and then like people, I think there was like a physics field trip to like Six Flags, but then I didn't go. And then we were having this conversation and he was like, how long have y'all been in the States? And then I knew where he was coming from with this, but I was like, we literally had a conversation in like perfect English. Like, why would you just assume that like I'm from China, I guess, you know? And it's just little stuff like that. I was like, wow, like as much as like I was born here and I already feel like this isolated, I can only like barely like comprehend like how like isolated like an actual immigrant must feel when like they come in, they're being told like you need to like assimilate, you know, you need to give up your culture in order to be truly accepted, which may or may not happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I was actually about to ask about that, like how you feel about your heritage, but Ben, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask about like your idea. So Alex explained this to me the other day. It's like, do you sort of believe in the idea of like a melting pot where it's like you're all sort of like becoming homogenous, or it's like a mosaic where it's like you have different splotches of like different colors, right? So it's like you don't sort of like homogenize.
That's such a philosophical question. I've never thought about it. I've never thought about it. Like, somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. Not like a complete mixture. Kind of like not smooth peanut butter, but like chunky peanut butter.
Ah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I actually like that comparison. That's a good comparison,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's not a complete like smooth mixture, but we've got chunks of different sizes and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somewhere in
I
the
guess
middle.
we're all peanut butter still, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
What
Ben,
were you going to ask again?
Oh, I was gonna ask, like, because you're also Asian American, like, if you ever felt, uh, like, how that affected you growing up, or how that affects you now, I guess.
I think I have very similar experiences to Alex, just like by the nature of sort of like you're a minority, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like I can't say I had exactly the same sort of like things, but I can for sure say that like I definitely gravitated to people that looked like me when I was younger. Like I think that's just sort of like the natural response to
Mm-hmm.
seeing some like this type of behavior, right? And so I remember from a young age, I always had Asian friends, mostly because like when I was younger, I gravitated to people that looked like me. And then as I got older, it's like I didn't want to like, not saying that I hate like American people. It's just along the lines of like it's harder for us to like break down the barrier of like familiarity, right? Because like when you like talk with like someone who's similar to you, there's sort of like an understanding, right? Like you guys have went through something similar to some capacity, right? But then you
Mm-hmm.
someone
Yeah.
that's like very very different from you, like you have to
Mm-hmm.
make the conceited effort to sort of like understanding the differences, and that's
Mm-hmm.
something my younger self never tried to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's actually very interesting because whenever I was in middle school, I purposefully resisted that urge to gravitate towards like Asian people. I had, you know, like I had that same urge because, you know, like some of the kids in my school, like were actually from Korea or they spoke Korean or they were, like I wasn't very proud of where I was coming from because I was so insecure. I just wanted to fit in. I felt so like left alone and like just so different from everyone. And I saw like these like Asian kids at my school all like hung out in like one pack, like kind of just they were like their own group and they hung out together, probably for the reason that you explained, right? Like kids, you know, tend to like just or just people in general tend to be more drawn to people that look like you, people that have your background. But I like purposefully like went away from that because I was like, I don't want to be Asian anymore. Like I felt that way whenever I was that young. I was like, I thought that's what made me so different. I thought that's why people were making fun of me, or like people were just giving me funny looks. Like I just felt very self-conscious about like my Asian and my Korean background. So I purposefully like didn't talk to those Asian people at my school. And like I tried to like make friends with more white people. And it was just so awkward. Like it was so awkward for me. And that's just what I did. And yeah, it's interesting because we like have different experiences with this. But if I were acting more naturally, if I weren't so like self-conscious and like just overthinking everything and like trying so hard to fit in, I would have probably just done the same thing, you know, just hung out with people that made me comfortable, you know.
Mm-hmm. What were your I guess you kind of touched upon this, but like what were your specific perceptions of like, I guess, like other Asian Americans or people of Asian descent that were born and raised in America? Because I know like growing up as an Asian American, like when I saw like other maybe international students or, you know, FOBs, like my instinct would be like, oh, they look like me, but like we're very different, you know? And I think like that divide continued even on to college, where like a lot of times like my circles, like my community, like we would kind of be joking like, oh, look at those like rich fobs, they're just like sitting by themselves, like eating together or only speaking in Chinese or Korean with each other. And like it was honestly just like almost as big as the divide between like us and like maybe other like ethnicities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I know what you're talking about. And then like you start to think they're kind of different, or like they're kind of like a little bit even weird. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that they kind of, you know, act differently, dress differently. They just like hang out with each other, you know. So I knew that, and that's what I was like actually trying not to be like. I just wanted to pretend like I'm American, you know? Like I inside and out, I like used to dye my hair blonde because I wanted to like, you know, all most Asians have black hair, you know, like or dark hair. I didn't want that. Like I just didn't want to be Asian anymore. So I guess my perception, and that was like perception about myself because I was fresh off the boat, you know, like I was a new immigrant, but yeah, I like tried so hard to change that. So I guess I didn't like that. Probably because it was who I was and I was like so self-conscious back then. And yeah, now I wish I just spoke in Korean and like talked to other students from Korea, like because you know that's what would have made me more comfortable. Like if I weren't trying so hard to not be myself. And I was actually talking to a friend the other day. He is also an immigrant. He speaks conversational English, but he has like a bit of an accent, and you can hear it. And he was talking about how like his accent sometimes gets in the way of like communicating with other people. And then I told him like if I could go back to when I had an accent, I don't think I would try to get rid of it because I think it's kind of cool that like it shows where you're coming from. Like it shows your heritage because like if you've spoken a language in like a country from the time of your birth, like why should you change the way you talk? You know what I mean? So yeah, my thoughts have changed a lot, but like I guess yeah, just I didn't think the same way. So I did. I hope that makes sense.
Oh,
Yeah.
it did. It did. What made you like kind of, what was the impetus for this like change in thought, you know, like, because now you're like, oh, I wish, you know, I was more in touch with my culture, but, or not in touch, but like, I wasn't trying to reject my culture back then. Like I would love to keep my accent.
Well, it's just becoming more confident, I think.
Mm,
I don't know if it's the same for other people, but as I like became an adult, especially like going through college, yeah, like from the beginning of college, like just kind of finding myself and who I am, like starting to dance more and you know, graduating college and just kind of living an adult life, I just became a more like, not just confident, but like a more truthful person to myself, you know? Because when you're young, like your priorities, or at least my priorities as a 12, like 13, 14, 15-year-old, was just to fit in, especially feeling that lost in like a new country and stuff like that. You know, I just became more truthful to myself. I just stopped lying to myself that I'm like, you know, I was like basically lying to myself whenever I was younger, like trying to be someone who I'm not, you know. I just stopped that. Like I just became more truthful, and then I came to think about all this. So yeah, the beauty of like kind of growing up. Yeah.
A lot of people actually struggle with like this idea of self-confidence. Like I know a lot of people that have graduated too that like still sort of like deal with this. Like how do you like what is your advice to people that are still like struggling with this kind of thing?
I'm still struggling with it too. I don't know. It's always a work in progress. It's always a work in
Mhm.
progress. And the more I think about it, the more I think it's like so internal rather than what shows outside. That's what I think. Like in college, like I used to dance a lot more in the community. I say in college because like, yeah, I think like at one point, like I don't want to sound braggy or anything. I had like a large following, like because of my dancing, and like I had publicity through like videos that my dance studio posted of me on YouTube and stuff like that. So like I think I came off as being confident, but even and like I thought I was being confident, but even at that point, I wasn't fully confident in myself. Like for example, during my last year of college, I struggled a lot with an eating disorder and a body image disorder. Like I was kind of like anorexic. Like I would be very, very controlled with my eating, and I would work out basically like 3 to sometimes 6 plus hours a day, every single day, just to keep my shape. Cause like I got comments on my body so much, like from like YouTube comments or like, you know, other people just telling me, oh my gosh, like I don't want to sound braggy again, but like they would say like you have like such nice abs, like you're like so toned, you're like skinny, and like comments like that. Those got to me so much that like I felt the need to fit their compliments, you know, and I couldn't forgive myself whenever my weight fluctuated up or something like that, because everyone's weight fluctuates, right? Like my weight fluctuates by about like 10 pounds, or like, yeah, 10 pounds like throughout the year. Sometimes I would be a little lighter, sometimes I would be a little heavier, but I couldn't forgive my heavier self, you know, like things like that. And then I'm better now. But why I say that is I think it's always a work in progress. And maybe in a few years when I grow up a little more, I'll like look back at myself. I'll be like, wow, like I wasn't very confident about this part about myself, you know? So I think it's a work in progress, and you should always kind of like work towards being honest with yourself, kind of being selfish, like kind of being selfish, not trying to fit into like what other people are telling you, just really doing what you want to do and living for yourself. I think that's what makes you a confident person. And I also say what I shared about my eating disorder and my body image disorder to say that confidence is so internal. It's not so external, because like people used to like tell me those compliments about like, you know, my shape or like my looks and things like that. And I probably looked really confident because like I would just wear like crop tops all the time, and then I'd be like, yeah, like, and then I would be working out, like I would just post photos of myself on Instagram and stuff like that. So I probably looked very confident, like very confident, comfortable in my body, but that was like the exact opposite of who I was, you know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me how like what you said about Instagram, just like a lot of times, like maybe a lot of people, like influencers per se, might use Instagram as a way to like project an image of confidence to kind of like convince themselves that they're like very confident. But then it also, interestingly, it might, you know, have an effect on people who follow them. They're like, oh, like this person seems to be confident. Like I have to pursue this way in order to be just like them, right? And I think at the end of the day, like you're right, like confidence is internal. Like when you base it off the validation of other people, like people, like those are people, right? Like their opinion, you know, comes and go, like they're fickle. Um, so like being able to like have an internal foundation for your own confidence and being like, hey, I love me for me, and you know, I'm willing to, you know, be with myself or love myself no matter what changes happen, which are inevitable. Um, is probably like a much more, you know, stable recipe for happiness than necessarily like, oh, I'm losing subscribers on YouTube or I'm losing followers on Instagram because of like I'm not doing like X, Y, and Z, and I gotta, you know, get back in the game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's so true. Like it validation actually means nothing at all. Like it means nothing. There's so much like so much more comfort and so much more peace in just doing whatever you want rather than just doing it for other people. And it's like it's not even people don't even consciously do it. It's like our human nature to like try to fit in or like try to be better than other people, things like that. But like that's why like I struggled with my eating disorder whenever I was like 19 to 20. Like at that point I was an adult, but even as an adult, I wasn't old, but like I was an adult, like with, you know, capabilities of thinking like an adult, but I was still harming myself trying to fit into what other people are saying. So like I'm saying like even adults can like just make that mistake, you
Mm.
know? Like so it's I think it's very important to like work on fighting that subconsciousness and just really doing what makes you happy and not really thinking about what would make other people happy. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
And about Instagram, yeah, like social media, yes, like it's not very good for your mental health because you like constantly compare yourself to other people on there. And probably what that's like definitely what kind of set off my eating disorder and like my
Mhm.
like criticism and like obsession with my body or like what I ate and stuff like that. But now like I learned from that, like whenever I see like content on Instagram about like dieting or like, you know, content on Instagram about like how you should like become more skinny or like these Instagram influencers like selling their program like 6 week challenge, like lose like half of your body weight, you know, I'm like that's some bullshit. Like I know now. So it's something that you
Yeah.
learn, like you just learn from your mistakes and you grow. Yeah.
Yeah, congrats on overcoming that. It sounds like a really tough thing because, like, most of the time, like, you just hear about it, and then, like, when it happens to you, you're like, no way, that can't happen to me, you know?
Yeah.
And then,
Uh-huh.
but
Exactly.
I was actually like, a friend was telling me about this, and he was telling me how like, Instagram has like really sort of changed like the makeup of the dance community, more so in how do I describe? Like, for example, clothing, right? Like nowadays there's sort of like a dance sort of fit, you know, like a style dancers have, especially because of the way they like do workshops nowadays. Like I understand like you want to record yourself. Like someone explained it to me. It's like, you know, you spend an hour like learning this choreography and then you want to go ham at the last 10 minutes, you know? But then it's like become like monetized in a sense. Like they put it out, they put it in like Instagram, YouTube, and just places where other people can see it. So now it's
Hmm.
instead of dancing your best, you also want to look your best.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why I struggled with it. And like uh being at my dance studio back in Korea, which has a lot of publicity on YouTube, like that didn't help either because it was so publicized. So like they would post a video of me and then it would have like millions of views like the next week or something like that. And then like in the comments, like there are comments about you and like how you look or like how your body looks or how your dancing looks. But yeah, a lot of them would actually not even be about your dancing. It would just be about your looks or like how your body looks. And you just, that messes you up, you know? Like just reading through those comments about yourself. And even if I like didn't work there, I was just a student, you know? So I could like not even imagine like what the teachers there feel.
Yeah.
So yeah.
On
I
that, actually, how do you feel about like Korean beauty standards in general? Because it's very heavy focus on sort of like fair skin, like what is it, double eyelids. You have like a very like angular face. You have very skinny body. You weigh not that much, stuff like that.
I think it needs a lot more work. Like people need to be a little more progressive with their thoughts. And I feel this way about a lot of Korean ideals, but especially their beauty ideals. I think it needs a lot of work, need a lot of inclusion, and like um, kind of putting people in a box, and then like for those that don't fit in that box, just like kind of thinking of them less. You know, this isn't just like the beauty standards there, but it's also like academic performance standards or like your income standards or like whatever, like your height, your body, or something like that. Like trying to fit everyone into one box and then making people feel bad about it whenever they don't fit in that box. I think that's something that needs to change about the Korean culture. And that's one of the most disappointing things about the Korean culture. And one of the reasons why I choose to stay in the US, although I miss Korea so much for different reasons. Like I said, they expect people to be super, super skinny. And I know, like, even whenever I was anorexic, even when I was restricting my diet so much to the point where I couldn't go to sleep because I was so hungry, I wasn't like skinny in Korean standards. I
oh
I was kind of thick. Like I was like not thick. That's the wrong word. But I have quite a bit of muscle. Like
mhm.
I'm a lot more muscular. Um, I'm pretty muscular for a girl, and especially in Korean standards because they don't really like think of women as like muscular. I don't know. So I wasn't that skinny. Like I wasn't stick. I wasn't like a stick. And even then I was like starving. Like I couldn't go to sleep because I was so hungry. Like I was always thinking about food. And just imagine like me trying to pursue those standards. Like might have like passed out, or like I might have had like more serious health issues than I did from there. So I think that's very, very unhealthy. And if I lived in Korea, I don't think I would have even gotten over my anorexia. I don't think I would have even discovered it because they're like dieting in Korea is so normalized. It's like so praised, and people think of it as something that you should do and you must do, especially for women but men too. So
Oh, I didn't know
like
that.
yeah, because they love skinny bodies, right? They love small bodies. So I think if I were back in Korea, I don't think I would have even realized I was so sick with
Mm,
my anorexia. I think I would have just thought this is just part of being me. Like this is just part of being fitting in the society, not even like being wanted or like being appraised, just like fitting in, just being a part of the society, you know?
mhm.
So
Like
I think that needs work. Hmm.
like yeah, like that's yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like that's not even like going above and beyond. Like that's the standard. Like this is the minimum you have to do to be like a regular person. And like especially I guess coming off of what you said, like if you're not really fitting in the box, then you're automatically outcasted. It kind of reminds
Hmm.
me of what I was hearing about, what like K-pop stars had to go through in training, like yeah, the cup diet where like everything you eat had to be in the cup. I thought that was, pretty wild to, for like someone to, because like, obviously like a cup is very small. So,
Hmm.
going through all that is like, had like hearing like I was like, oh, this just sounds like I kind of compared it to sports in my head because like in American sports at least, like you're used to hearing about like the almost inhumane stuff people go through in order to be great. So I was like, oh, maybe like K-pop stars feel the same way. But then, kind of hearing like your story of how like in Korea, like being skinny is like expected, and a lot of people would be considered anorexic. They wouldn't even think of it as a problem. Makes me wonder, like, oh, like for these K-pop stars, like to us, like it seems like this is very wrong, and like they're suffering a lot in order for like fame. But for them, is like, is that even a lot compared to what the normal citizen does, or is that just like a natural extension?
So whatever K-pop stars have to go through in terms of their diet and training, if that's like expected of normal people, if that's what you're asking, right?
Or I guess like, is it, because like to me it's like that's like really far up there, but like I'm assuming that that is still more than what a normal Korean person would do. But is it like as far up there as like I perceived, or is it like only like a couple steps above, like in terms of dieting? Does that make sense?
I think it goes the other way around. They're not going at a few steps above other people. They're setting the standards and people are trying to follow it. Does that make sense? People are like, I want to look like this K-pop star, so I'm going to eat in a cup, or I'm just going to eat 3 eggs a day and a sweet potato, or like I'm just going to drink water for a week because I want to look like this K-pop star, and this K-pop star did that. So they are all, it's a vicious cycle basically. Like they're always expected to be skinny, they're expected to be beautiful, so they get all these plastic surgeries, or maybe they're just like born naturally pretty. That's fine, like, go you, girl. Like, but a lot of the times, like a lot of people would get plastic surgery, or in order to look like them, even like people that weren't born with a pretty face, pretty in Korean standards, not calling anyone ugly, and they will want to look like these celebrities, so they go on these diets that are just so extreme, and they just ruin their bodies, and it's not a fun time at all. And then it just like repeats, right? Like they set the standard, and then like people try to follow it, and then like the new stars that come along are like expected to follow the standards, and then it just circles like that. So I really, really hope that their thoughts, like they become more socially progressive with their thoughts. I hope they become more inclusive of everyone, like everyone with different looks and different educational capabilities or preferences, or like different desires, not just people that want to go to college and then like follow the traditional track of like getting a job at this company and then blah blah blah. Like I just want them to be more inclusive of everyone, and like people with mental illnesses too. Like just being more inclusive of differences is something that needs a lot of work in the Korean culture, in my opinion.
Yeah. On a slightly tangential note, recently there was news about Donald Trump sort of making like an executive order in regards to like immigrants and like F1 students. What are your like thoughts surrounding that?
So first of all, I am an immigrant, like I mentioned. So I guess I'm more pro-immigrant because I'm an immigrant myself. But aside from where I come from, I think Trump's executive orders are more of like just kind of like a show off for the elections, really, because they don't, like, if you see his executive orders for the green card ban, or his executive orders for H-1B, H-2B, J-1, and I think Q-1 ban, those were like the work authorizations, temporary work authorizations ban. They all pertain to people that are currently outside the US and that currently don't have lawful permanent residency in the US. And he claims in his executive orders that these executive orders are in order to protect the jobs of the American people, right? But if you think about it, most people that are competing for the job market here are already in the US, and not many people are trying to travel. Like not many people are trying to like move across the world to like establish a new life in the US or like something like that with a new visa in the middle of a pandemic. Not a lot of people are doing that. Like a lot of the immigrants are already here looking for their jobs like on their visa. So I don't think it really affects a lot of people. It just creates a lot of unnecessary tension for immigrants more so, and just a lot of like more, I guess, support from his supporters because they just like see the title. They're like, oh, they like stopped, Trump stopped immigrants from coming here. Like, how great. Although like it, and they say like Trump like saved jobs for the Americans, like how great. Although like he didn't really do anything. He didn't even do anything. Like, and it just kind of makes me mad to read those because he just like accuses immigrants of just like stealing jobs, like just these terrible people like coming from the outside and like taking all of our resources, all of our jobs, all of our money. And I'm like, that's not it. And like temporary workers in the US, they also do stimulate the economy. They, fill jobs that like aren't available in the American workforce whenever the companies are looking for them. So I think he's making the wrong accusation, and I think it's very unfair because he would establish these executive orders and like these laws so suddenly that like, let's say like a visa holder in the US who had to go back home to like visit their family or like just had to leave the country for a second, they like wake up in the morning and they see this news and they're like, so I can't go back home where like I have a house or like a lease where like all of my stuff is and where all of my friends are, where my job is. Like having to wake up to that and having to live in that fear and not being able to visit your home country comfortably, I think that's very unfair. Like his orders just come with no precaution and no like time for people to get ready. So yeah, that's just how I feel about it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I definitely agree on terms of like the unfairness, like it's very last minute. Like even though I still kind of disagree with like maybe the policy of the supposed like executive order, like I feel like if you had to do it, at the very least you could give people like a couple months. Like they already been here, like as like, as you talked about earlier, it's not easy moving to a foreign country. And then you're just gonna like kick them out like that, like kind of last minute. I just feel like, yeah, it's just really unfair. I also am not super comfortable with the rhetoric around immigrants either, mainly because, as a son of immigrants and with a face that looks like mine, I don't, appear American to most people, especially in like areas in the US that are very homogenous. So like they're not used to seeing, different ethnicities around. I remember actually watching a video about immigration in general, so specifically in Japan, because Japan's a very homogenous society. They're like 98, 99% Japanese, and they're very anti-immigration. That they're running into a problem, and that is like their society is way too developed, and they work their people to like a lot of times suicide. So now they don't have time to raise kids, so population is slowing down, and that's not good for the economy. So then they're like, what should we do? And then one person was like, how about immigration? And then they just laugh, they're like, that can't be an option. But then like as time goes on, like they're actually like, okay, we might have to accept immigrants, right? And it's interesting how like in the US, I think a lot of like far right wing politicians, like they tend to look to Japan as like, oh, this is our ideal, right? Like they're all like this one race, like this is what America should aspire to be. And the video was kind of talking about how like actually like because technically like right wing politics, like they like to associate themselves with like capitalism. They're like, technically if you're like proponent of capitalism or right wing politician, like you actually want illegal immigrants, because like they're technically doing the jobs that like nobody really wants to do, like as messed up as that is. Like you can pay them less. They're yeah, you literally don't have to really provide for them. And but like for the voter, like populace that like tends to vote for these type of politicians, like they don't want immigrants, right? So technically what they do is like there's a lot of things like for show, like as you mentioned with like Trump and how a lot of his past executive orders like don't really do much to people like outside or people on the inside. So it's like I remember like Obama, like since his populace was slightly more moderate, like it would be like, oh, like we don't want immigration, or we want immigration, but we want them to be treated better. So, but then Obama actually started a lot of these like current like ICE camps. So like under like so on the surface he was like, yeah, like I'm for immigration, but like under the table he's like let's like gather these people. And then I'm not saying Trump is a consistent person, but technically if he was, he would he would like kind of use the wall for show, but then like let them come anyway. And I just thought that was super interesting because later on he also talked about like the idea of like why people are so afraid of immigrants. It's because people are like, oh, it's like these unknown people, they're coming in like almost like it's an infiltration, right? They're going to come over and take over our population, and we're going to be like oppressed. And then he was like, technically like studies have shown like if you want immigrants to assimilate, you have to treat them nicely and maybe like, hey, like you're part of this country now, and then they'll be more willing to like assimilate, like learn the language. But like I was looking at our like country's history and I was like, wow, we've done the exact opposite of that, right? Like I remember when the Chinese came to vote on the railroads, we're literally just like, all right, once we're done exploiting you, like you're not in the picture, like you can't buy houses, you have to go live in Chinatown, we're gonna like lynch you. So like, of course like it makes sense like why immigrants like kind of stick together, because they don't know who to trust except for people that are similar to them, right? And I guess like I was just kind of thinking like, it's kind of like the cycle of fear and hatred like really perpetuates itself. It's an endless like negative feedback loop, because you're like, I'm scared of these people and I'm not going to treat them well. But to those people, they're like, I don't know you. Why are you treating me poorly? I'm going to fight back. And it's just everyone's getting themselves ammo. And yeah, it's just like, I feel like as naive as it sounds, like, the only way for all this to stop is like, we just sit down and be like, hey, like we're different, but like we're in this country together, let's not treat each other like neither side is not human. But I think it takes a lot of growing up and self-control to not be like, I want to like make you pay for everything that I think you've done to me, when the other side is doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think what you said is very interesting, especially in terms of Obama. I was very young whenever he was a president, so I don't think I paid attention to politics as much, but I didn't know he actually started the IC camp, or like that underneath his, like very progressive policies, he was actually like doing some control over immigrants. I'm going to do some more research about that after our conversation, but I'm glad you brought that up. And like what you said about like the fear of immigrants and things like that, like how people will think we'll just come here and take over the country and stuff like that. I think that fear might come from like what the Europeans actually did back in like Columbus's day. That's exactly what they did, and they did it. Like they basically destroyed the Native Americans here, and they're like, okay, we've done that now. Now we don't want that to happen again. Like now we don't want someone else to do that again to us, because we know that's like not that great. Like that's not a fun experience on the other end. So maybe that's why they feel that way, but you can't really generalize that about everyone, I guess. And I had another point to bring up, but I'm like blanking out.
Well, that's fine. Ben, what are your thoughts? And then, yeah.
I just think it's like super ironic, right? Because like America, or like the United States of America, used to be like a safe haven for immigrants back in the day, right? Like, what was it? That island on New York was like established specifically for that reason, right? I forgot what, Ellis Island?
That sounds right.
It's like the one that's near the Statue of Liberty, and it's like, like back in the day, like it was supposedly like when you were an immigrant and you got there, you're like, okay, I know I'm safe. Like I know I'm not going to be persecuted. I know I'm not going to like XYZ is no longer going to happen to me, Like, but now it's different. The climate is so different. It's just like like half the United States kind of wants like immigrants to just completely disappear, you know? And it's really wild thinking that we are a country built upon immigration, where we pride ourselves on the idea that we are like some form of a melting pot, right? And so it's like very, very ironic to sort of like have this sort of rhetoric going around.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, yeah. I thought I know what I was about to say. What I was blanking on earlier, I guess. Also relating to immigration and relating to, I guess, what Alex mentioned a little bit earlier about like how Chinese people were treated like historically, like that, and that fear of immigrants, like that's still there. I don't know if you guys saw this. There was another EO executive order that came about at the end of May, I think, or in the beginning of June, and it was actually banning Chinese students, Chinese graduates, so masters and PhD students, from studying in the US on the F1 visa in the STEM degrees, because they thought like there was this, I think this came directly from Senator Tom Cotton. He's the senator of Arkansas. Whenever Trump was producing these executive orders banning immigrants, especially in the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak in the US, like his first executive order, first big one was like the green card ban, right? And then at the bottom of that executive order, if you read it, it says, I will be taking, like suggestions from any other like government officials, like other politicians on like what should be further done about this. And Tom Cotton, who is a right-wing senator from Arkansas, he made claims that like the F1 student visa should be banned and the Chinese F1 students should be banned because they would study in the US and they would bring proprietary information from the US and like valuable knowledge from the US and bring it back to China and use it for their benefit and for their military benefit or for their technological benefit, right? And that's that's beyond racist. That is so racist. Like it's not even towards like all immigrants, it's just like towards one specific country. And that's just like absolutely messed up. And there was actually an executive order that got produced like in the beginning of June from Trump that claimed that any graduate Chinese students studying STEM in the US cannot be here if their intention is to bring back information to the Chinese military and benefit them, whatever that means. It was very vague in terms of like what benefits the military, So things like that, like I just wanted to bring that up because like the fear of immigrants is still real. And I think the reason why this accusation is being made to China is because, of the friction between China and the US in terms of like politics and stuff like that. And also because China is like an economically very strong country, you know what I mean? Like it's a powerful country. So I think that's why. And that reminded me of those days whenever there was like the Chinese immigration ban, like in the late 1800s, whenever they were just treating the Chinese immigrants very poorly and things like that. Yeah. So it's still there. Like, I think we're digressing too fast in terms of like xenophobia and like the way we treat people.
Yeah,
For sure.
I think it reminds me of another thing that happened recently. Yeah, you can date this podcast by just what we're saying, but like recently the US had, or one of the senators, someone in the Trump administration sort of made an announcement that they're looking to ban TikTok in the US because of its ties to China. And it is an application made in China, yes, but there's a lot of sort of like data sort of infrastructure in the US already. Like all of the US data is just, it doesn't like fucking go to China and then come back here. That's like so inefficient. Like there's a lot of infrastructure here already. And that's what TikTok is like. Their executives in the US are trying to make this argument that it's like, this is completely false. Like all of this stuff is here. You just don't like things that are like Chinese. And it's just so mind boggling.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually just reading about that today too. And India actually already banned it already. Like India banned TikTok already just because it's from China. I honestly don't know what goes behind the scenes. Like, if like the government actually uses the software to steal information from people and like to spy on people. I don't know how true that accusation is. Like, I don't know what the basis of that accusation is. I don't know if they actually have solid evidence on that. But if they're making those accusations, like, I hope they like I hope it's coming from a valid claim. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, just apart from it being from China. Like, if TikTok is like, if there's like a good reason for us to be suspicious about what they do with our data, then yeah, like I think it's fair to ban it. But like, if it's just because they're Chinese and like they don't like Chinese people and they think all Chinese apps are made to spy on people, then no, like that's just that's not right. Like,
For sure.
so yeah, and I feel like it's so unfair too, because I read this article exactly about this, and the exact wording was this: like, the app TikTok is stealing information from the US citizens to benefit the Chinese Communist Party. They called it the Chinese Communist Party, not just China. So it's like they're just called, like, you're just making a political tension out of this. You know what I mean? Like, why? Like,
Yeah.
For sure.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely think we're kind of in the midst of, not the midst, but maybe like beginning of a new Cold War between, the US and China, like how there was a Cold War between US and the Soviet Union back in like after World War II to like the early 90s. And I think it's actually very crazy how like propaganda is spread, because it kind of begins with like an inkling of truth, right? Um, and it kind of blows up into something like far more than that, right? Because I have a very complicated reaction to like all of this, because like my parents are from Hong Kong, and like what China's doing to Hong Kong right now, like with the new national security law, I'm not a fan of, because it honestly, to me, it feels like the place of my ancestors, or the place where my parents grew up, is like, starting to fall apart. So I'm not like a super big fan of China, right? But something I realized is that um, I think because like I've had this, fear of China, this like intense dislike of China, that like when I read stuff like, oh, the US is gonna ban TikTok, my first reaction was actually like, good, like I hate China, I don't want anything to do with it. But then someone pointed out like, Facebook also collects a lot of our data. Like, are we calling the ban Facebook? And I'm like, that's an excellent point. So a lot of
Mhm.
countries, like foreign countries, like Facebook might be just as bad as TikTok, because America's not the most pure country. We've hired the CIA and overthrown democratically elected countries for dictators that are that serve our best interests. We've created a mess in a lot of places. Like, we're not, like, to a lot of people, like America is an evil country, and they're not wrong. So like my view of China, is like I'm seeing it from like, oh, like they're destroying the city like I identify with. Um, they're kind of like slowly eradicating like languages that aren't like Mandarin. They're doing a lot of bad stuff to like Uyghur Muslims. Like, my first instinct would be like, okay, like they're the bad guys, right? But then something I kind of realized is that like I guess the world is a lot more gray and nuanced than like it is just something like, oh, this opposing side is bad, because like I have to look at like kind of the sins of like my own country. And just the fact that like, yes, like maybe like this country is like a rising superpower, and like they've done some like nefarious things in the world, doesn't mean that you can necessarily categorize all their citizens as like, oh, they're here to come spy on us and topple us up from within, right? Because that is fear mongering. And with these things like escalate, like Chinese citizens will rightfully have like um I guess maybe not, I won't say an excuse, but they rightfully have like evidence that like people in America don't like them, and like they have to band together, and they can only trust the certain government. And yeah, that's kind of going back to like what I said earlier, just like how fear kind of breeds more fear and hate breeds more hate. And it's a very slippery slope. That's what I realized. Because like honestly, the past couple of days, like I've really not been happy with like China. So like anything I see that's like anti-China, I'm like upvote, you know, like spend time reading, make myself feel better, you know, like, oh, like ignoring whatever problems like America's doing, like at least we have this evil country, China, right? Like I can like cast all my hatred to. But like, you know, honestly, like, you know, listening to this conversation and like reading some not echo chambery stuff that's anti-China, I'm also realizing that like kind of justifying my anger and hatred is like not really helpful, and it's like also like hurting other people, and that kind of just, you know, continues that cycle. But yeah, that's the end of my ramble because I have strong feelings about this.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. Like I appreciate that um you go against your instincts. Like someone said this, bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you. Someone said this. You know, humans have their own opinions, right? We have what we want to believe in. We have our beliefs, and we constantly and by instinct we look for evidences that only support our opinions and not go against it. That's our instinct. But Alex, what you just said about, like, you know, how you feel about China, which is very, like, you know, it's reasonable that you feel that way. Like I would feel that way if, you know, I was in your situation too, but like kind of realizing that, you know, there's the other side of the argument too. I think that's very important, and that's very like it goes against your instincts, but it's a very good attitude to have whenever you're receiving information. So I would like to applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Validation.
Yeah. So that's good.
Also, something that another friend brought up to me before, sort of like in the context of networking, they're like talking to me about how like the loose ties between large networks are the ones that transfer the most amount of information, right? And like to apply this to sort of like the tensions between the US and China, it's these loose tensions, like these immigrants that go back and forth that transfer all the information. And so like, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in like an actual positive way, because like if developed countries just sort of like hoard all the information to themselves, because information is power, and you sort of like get this sort of unbalanced look of the world, like how it currently exists, right? You have the superpowers in all the developed countries really control the flow of the entire world, and the rest of the countries that sit below that are like trying to get there, they're sort of gated out from it because the developed countries use such a large percentage of their resources. And on top of that, they don't even bother to share information with each other because they're very xenophobic towards each other. For largest example being US and China. And so I just think as you like cut off these connections more and more and more, it sort of limits the growth of humanity as a whole, just because like you sort of have this instinct to just like protect your own little bubble as opposed to like sort of expand it outwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My friend one of my closest friends from college, who I used to dance with a lot, he's like a very idealistic person. Like he's a very philosophical person. And he once said, like, why are there so many like borders? You know, like why can't like why can't we just, you know, be citizens of the world and just like, you know, why do we have borders? Like why is it a thing? You know, although this is a very idealistic idea, but this conversation makes me think of that. Like what's the point of all this? Like we're all the same at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Borders cause so many headaches. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up.
I think it's like the hardest part is that like people have a hard time sort of like uniting with someone that they are like seen as different. They have like different traits, right? For example, you come from a different country, you come from a different place, you look different from me, you like think differently from me. People have a hard time like uniting against that unless there's something that's like greater to unite against. Like I remember I watched a clip of Ronald Reagan, and he was addressing the UN, and he's talking about the only way for all the people on Earth to unite is if like aliens invaded. That's like just the boil it down. And at the time, like I think it was like the 1980s, whenever Reaganomics was, and it just like sounded so dumb. But now that I think about it, I was like, that it has a lot of truth to it, because like it's really hard for people to unite with someone that's different from them unless there's like a greater cause. And there is none. It's really hard to sort of unite people.
Yeah. So I think aliens need to take over the Earth now. I think
Basically,
that's the next solution to
Indeed.
all of our problems.
But not just any aliens. We need aliens that want to conquer us, because otherwise we're not going to have the will to be like, we have to fight against these aliens, you know. But something
Yeah.
that stood out to me in high school, it was an AP Econ. They're like, why do we have economics? Or what's the foundation? And it's like scarcity, right? Resources are scarce. Not everyone can get as much as they want, and that just leads to people like hoarding or fighting over these resources. That's like there's wars and stuff, right? And I was kind of thinking about how, like, you know, the reason why I think, at least in my opinion, like it boils down to like, you know, we want to have, you know, a bigger slice of the pie because it's like finite, and we're willing to do whatever it takes. And we kind of band together in groups because we know we can't do everything by ourselves. And we're like, okay, I believe like this tribe leader, this group, this faction will be able to provide for me. And like if someone has to have it, this resource, whether it's like food, water, money, riches, like it's better us than them, right? But I see that attitude a lot, like even now, where people are kind of just like, you know, we can't look out for these people, we better look out for ourselves. But like it's like this kind of this attitude of isolationism where like, you know, you only, you know, like let's not get bothered in the affairs of other countries or other people. Like we just take care of ourselves, it doesn't matter. But even then, like that still has an impact on other people. Like the world is just too intertwined at this point for, I guess, like you to kind of just selfishly like dip and just be like, I'm gonna do what's best for me, and sucks to be you, you know. And even then is like you're affected by that as well. Like you're not, you know, as Ben said, like you're not the brain trust of the world. You're not gonna have access to that. Like I feel like as people, like we work, you know, better like as a group. And our like even our differences, like they provide different perspectives, and that allows you to see, you know, parts of the puzzle or parts of the issue in like different lights. Because like, you know, I think there's like a saying of like, if like everyone like in your group like kind of thinks the same way as you do, or like or as just like as gifted or as intelligent as you are, then like you're not really gonna solve any problems, because you guys will all reach the same problem at the same time and think exactly the same way, and then you'll never move past it, right? Like that's honestly like I remember like in sports. Sorry, I've been using a lot of sports comparisons, but like they recently hired like an assistant female coach for like the San Antonio Spurs, and she has an analytics background. And then the first reaction, at least on Reddit, was just like, why are we hiring this person if she has no experience? Like, I'm tired of all these like, you know, like tokens, right? Like minority hires, like to just make them like seem good PR. But someone brought up like I think by the basis of like not necessarily having played like men's professional basketball and like being a woman, like she offers like a lot of valuable input because like she doesn't think the same way as they do. Like if you are running a business, like you don't necessarily want it all to be just like Wall Street dudes, because like as I said, they all think the same way. Like you might want to bring in like a doctor per se, like, you know, like he needs to be like what are the health ramifications of this? Like how will this affect people and unintended consequences? And I was like, yeah, I really definitely see like why it's important to increase the number of minorities in like businesses or like the film industry or whatever, because like representation, like, you know, if we unite all these different people, like it really plays into a better world for all of us, you know. But I think what it turns into is just like, oh, like this is just a quota, or like you're just like trying to cut me off from getting what I want. But like, yeah, if you kind of think of it in a different light, like, hey, we're all kind of working into this to build a better place for everyone together, and like I definitely see like kind of the appeal of this.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that example about the soccer coach. Yeah, yeah, very valuable.
I just think in general, I feel like it comes up a lot when people talk about relationships, right? They're like, oh, like you shouldn't take advice from someone who's never been in a relationship because they don't know what they're talking about. And I just think that idea is the same principle as this one, right? It's like technically they don't have experience, right? But that doesn't mean what they're saying is invalid. It's sort of just it's just like they have a different view. And because like a lot of people, when they give their sort of advice, it's very experience based, like it's very anecdotal. And so what ends up happening is they're like, oh, I did this way and it worked out for me, so you should do it this way too. But like that's kind of not how like people function. Not people aren't the same, you know? So like you can't just do the same steps and arrive at the same place.
Exactly. I like that. I like that example. Yeah, because like, yeah, that's definitely true about like you can provide input even though you don't have that experience, and that I guess that lack of experience also makes you have different opinions, which like make your input more valuable because they're not the same as everyone else's. So that's pretty clever. I like that. Yeah, that's very
I
true.
mean, there is a saying how like the person like watching the chess match knows more about the game than the people actually playing the game, right? Because like you're
Mm,
in the game, like you have slight tunnel vision basically because you're focused on like winning. You're like, I don't want to make a mistake. But for a person on the outside, they're like, I have no stake in this. So you're able to free your mind basically to kind of see what are all the possible moves.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This kind of ties back to our immigrant conversations that you know immigrants are different,
Yeah.
so they can be beneficial to the U.S. or whatever country, I guess. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, this does really tie back because then it's like you were talking about how like you wanted like if you could go back in time, you would change it so that you were different, right? And that's like that's what makes you like you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All of our conversation for the past hour just kind of like they all tied together. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that was a beautiful link up, you know. Like
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that. Like honestly, guys, like whoever's listening, like we did not script it that way to be like, oh yeah, that's why you know
No.
we should love immigrants. I was just like, you're right. You know, I think it's the beauty of that principle, you know, that philosophy, and just like it's so applicable in like different ways, right? Like not just like you know hiring people for a job or for like a movie, but even just like the way you like appreciate life and like see people who are different from you. Like it kind of you know ties back to you know Ben's earlier question about mosaic versus a melting pot. Like I personally like really like the idea of mosaic because like honestly mosaic can create like a really you know beautiful picture. Like it's like literally art. Like in ways like you see the different you know disparate little details that build up the picture, and like it's still unique. Like no one has like lost an individual part, but it still builds up to something um that we can all appreciate together.
I love that. I love that. I like that better than chunky peanut butter, honestly.
Really? I like chunky peanut butter a lot too.
I think
Chunky peanut
I
butter sort of like really encapsulates what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah.
definitely,
I mean, just the
definitely.
fact like how unique that comparison was, like chunky peanut butter. I liked it from the start because I was like, dude, this person like you think different, you know, and I love that.
I don't even know where that came from. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted peanut butter or something. I
Dude,
don't
dude.
know.
That's the
Yeah.
beauty of inspiration.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kind of wrapping things up because we're a little over our usual podcast length. But on a more maybe lighthearted conversation, depending on how you look at it. What are your plans post quarantine?
I'm going to dance my heart out. Absolutely. I'm going to get with everyone that I miss dancing with. And I'm just going to go back into the community. I'm going to dance with other people. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go back to Korea for my mom to come here.
Mm.
Um, so, mom, if you're watching this, I got an extra room for you. So, she knows this already, but yeah. Um, so that's gonna be dope. Like we didn't mention this, but I just bought my first home, and I have the bedroom that I sleep in, and then this is like actually my office, and my office has a that's my bed. I won't turn it all the way, but that's the headboard of my
Ah.
bed. So this is for my mom when she visits.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's so sweet.
Yeah.
It,
Well, and like
it,
if I just like get tired of work, I'll just take a nap. Yeah.
dude, so
So that's it. I really miss my family, and I miss dancing and working out with other people. What about you guys?
Honestly, pretty much the same as you. Like I miss dancing too. I miss working out. I miss seeing people. I miss just doing large scale things like you know, like concerts, like going to XYZ event, just everything that like I wish I could have had in like the last bit of senior year that got canceled is what I miss.
Yeah, that I couldn't imagine that. Like that is so sad. It's like it's college and like also it's yeah, like having that happen to my college senior year would have been like so heartbreaking. Because it's not just like the experience, but it's also like the economic hardship and like going into the workforce as like a fresh grad, you know, like that's very difficult. So yeah, but hopefully Corona would like just kind of die down soon. Yeah. What about you, Alex?
Um, yeah, pretty similar to both of y'all. Like, I miss, seeing my friends or like, having just like being outside, like late at night, just talking or walking around, exploring places. Like, I miss kind of like that freedom where like that was just something you didn't have to think that much about, right? You just wanted to do it, you just do it, or you just wanted to go to a large scale event of more than 50 people. You weren't just like, I'm committing a crime. But I think it's all the little things. It's all the little things in my life basically that I took for granted that I really miss. Like I appreciate being able to spend time with my family in quarantine and like being in a house and like I don't have to worry too much about finances. But yeah, I guess maybe even the freedom to like try new things, meeting new people. Honestly, this podcast has been kind of a way for me to meet new people. That being able to yeah, I something like I've really been thinking about is like the reason why adulthood seems so scary and stale is because like we're expected to like stop growing once we graduate from college and stop trying new things, like focus on just work and stability. But the key to kind of or at least I think the key is, because I haven't done it yet, but the key is to keep on meeting new people, trying new things, and that's just something I'm looking forward to. Once quarantine is over, hopefully we get a competent president who dictates proper policies and doesn't blame people. But who knows? We'll see in November.
Yeah, we'll see in November. Hopefully we'll smile after the election. Yeah.
But yeah.
All right.
Yeah, just wrapping things up. This is Nuanced Nonsense. We're not experts. We just like talking. Signing out.